recording this session today. There we go. By day, I am mild-mannered librarian Emily Kingsland. I'm a subject librarian at McGill. My specialties are psychology and educational psychology. But by night, I am star of the movie 101 Dalmatians and also the book Cruella de Vil. And I'll allow
Hey.
Marcella to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marcella Suster. On land, I am a librarian. I am the coordinator of the Digital Scholarship Hub, as well as the librarian for the School of Information Studies and Hispanic Studies. And when I'm swimming, I am the queen. Well, she's not really a queen. She's a princess
She's
herself,
a princess, yes.
the Little Mermaid, but the hipster one, because, she does have some myopia.
Yes, hipster mermaid. Thank you so much, Marcella. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so here is today's agenda for today. I'm going to start off by talking about some global Halloween trends. Then Marcella is going to leap into spending and consumer behavior. I'll talk about lots of Halloween shopping habits. Marcella is going to talk about the costume and makeup trends that we're seeing this year. I'm going to delve into some candy preferences in North America. Marcella is going to do a bit of a historical context and talk about the very, very truly scary topic of witch hunts. And then lastly, we're going to end up on a light note where I'm going to talk about horror movies. So let's party. Okay, so trick-or-treating has been a big part of Halloween in the US and in Canada since the early 1900s. But the idea of kids going door to door for treats actually goes back to the Middle Ages. So in the British Isles during the Middle Ages, people would dress up for the holidays and visit neighbors, performing little skits and songs in exchange for food and drinks. And that tradition actually still lives on in places like Scotland and Ireland, where it's known as guising. And today, instead of performances, kids dress up in costumes and go door to door, just like trick-or-treating, but with a local twist. Halloween, as we all know, is celebrated on October 31st, but it has its roots in ancient Celtic traditions, especially the festival of Samhain. It marks the start of winter, and it was believed to be the time of year when spirits and fairies were especially active, so people would try to keep them happy with offerings. Later on, Christian holidays like All Saints' Day on November 1st and its Eve, also known as All Hallows' Eve, were placed around the same time, blending with other pagan customs. Interestingly, trick-or-treating isn't just a Halloween thing. In Portugal, kids go door to door asking for treats on November 1st instead. Now, you may have heard of Dia de Muertos, or Day of the Dead. This holiday mixes indigenous and Christian traditions to honor the departed. It's celebrated in Mexico and other parts of Latin America. In Mexico, it's customary for children to ask for, tell me if I'm saying this correctly, Marcela, calaveritas? So-ish. Okay, thank you, Marcella. Marcella is originally from Argentina. Or little skulls, sweets and treats. And on November 1st. So Halloween has become more popular as it's become a fun secular holiday in Mexico and in Latin America. And you do see more children going door to door for trick-or-treating. If you want to learn more about Day of the Dead, Marcella will share a link in the chat to a digital exhibit on the topic that she's curated. And we also have a beautiful Dia de Muertos display in our library, so that the Humanities and Social Sciences library that Marcella and some students and faculty have put together, and is on display until Monday. So if you are in town, please do check it out. Trick-or-treating and dressing up in costumes aren't just Halloween traditions, and they don't always happen on October 31st. So in Scandinavia, kids actually get into costume and go door to door at Easter. In parts of northern Germany and in southern Denmark, they do it on New Year's Eve instead. Meanwhile, in southern Germany, Austria, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and Flanders in Belgium, children sing songs in exchange for treats on November 11th, which is St. Martin's Day. And lastly, in Central Asia, a similar tradition pops up during Ramadan where kids go caroling for sweets. All right, next slide, Marcella. Thank you. So Halloween is a widely celebrated tradition in the United States, with around 70% of Americans planning to participate in Halloween celebrations in 2024. In 2020, obviously, planned participation fell noticeably, no doubt as a result of the pandemic. Next slide, please. For last year's Halloween, over 40% of consumers in the United States stated that they were planning to hand out candy, which is a slight increase compared to the previous year. More than 30% were going to dress up in a costume, like Marcella and myself, and decorate their house or property. There was also expected to be an increase in the number of people taking their children trick-or-treating, as well as the number of people who plan to watch scary movies or visit a haunted house. Roughly 30% of those surveyed sadly did not intend to celebrate this occasion. Next slide, please, Marcella. So, this statistic shows the share of Americans who plan to dress up for Halloween in 2018. 54% of respondents stated that they are planning to dress up. 33% stated that their partner is going to, and more than 20% are planning to dress up their pet in a costume. And Marcella will be talking more about pet costumes later on in our presentation. Next slide, please. This stat gives us a peek at how many kids went trick-or-treating in Canada between 2000 and 2016. So in 2016 alone, about 3.87 million children aged 5 to 14 hit the streets in costume, ringing doorbells and collecting candy all across the country. Next slide, please. Last year, Canadian parents of children who were old enough to go trick-or-treating were asked if their kids would be going out that Halloween, and an overwhelming almost 84% of respondents said yes, they would. Next slide. Now, when it comes to handing out candy, out of all of the provinces and territories, we are definitely the stingiest in Quebec, with only 30% of households saying they'd be handing out candy on Halloween. By comparison, in Ontario, there were nearly 55% of households that were going to planning on handing out candy, which is the highest in Canada. Next slide. When it comes to decorating for Halloween, Quebec once again lags behind the other provinces and territories, with only 28% of Quebec households decorating their homes. The Atlantic provinces really have us beat, with 46% of residents decorating their places for Halloween. Next slide, please. And once again, we are real party poopers in this province, with only 21% of adults dressing up for Halloween. So you're welcome. You're welcome. Marcel and I are contributing to that 21%. Obviously, we're in the minority. However, in Ontario, it has the highest percentage of adults who plan on dressing up for Halloween at 30%. Next slide, please. So there's an ongoing debate in Canada, and that has been to move trick-or-treating and other Halloween activities and parties to be on the last Saturday of October. Now, compared to 3 years ago, fewer Canadians are convinced to do this. More than 2 in 5 Canadians disagree with changing Halloween's date, while about 15% are still undecided. Now, support for moving Halloween to Saturday has its highest amount of support in Quebec. Kind of funny when you think about we're party poopers, but maybe we're just party poopers because we don't like working on a weekday night. We'd rather move it to a weekend. So 45% of folks in this province of Quebec want to move it to Saturdays, followed by Ontario, British Columbia, and the Atlantic provinces. In the prairies, not so much. Alberta has only 37% support, and Saskatchewan and Manitoba at 34%. Men are way more. Oh, one last thing, Marcella. Men are much more in favor of moving Halloween to Saturdays than women. And there's also far more support on moving it to Saturdays amongst 18 to 34-year-olds. Now, Marcella is going to talk about spending and consumer behavior.
Okay, so it's time to say RIP to our wallets and talk a little bit about how much money we spend on Halloween. One thing that you will see throughout the presentation is that we mix some Canadian data with some US data. Unfortunately, Canada is a small country in terms of like how many people we have compared to the US. So a lot of the research and a lot of the stats gathering has been done more in the US than here in Canada. But we do feel like certain attitudes can, be easily translated or easily like applied to Canada. So just something for you to know. Okay, so RIP to our wallets. Let's talk about how much money we spend on Halloween. So I'm gonna ask, and Emily kind of like gave it out a little bit, but I want to see if you can tell me which province do you think spends the most and which one spends the least? You can put it in the chat if you want. Because I am Ariel. I just go into the cave and just get things from like, shipwrecks, but not everyone can do that. Okay, let's see. We
I
have
just get
some.
my goons, Horace and Jasper, to steal candy for
So
me.
I say Ontario the most. We're onto something. Okay, so on average, a Canadian household would spend about $65 on Halloween, which actually, funnily enough, is like what the Atlantic provinces spend. However, that number goes up by two. So like about almost by two. So a household with kids actually spend $121, which in a way makes sense. We have more people, you do more things for Halloween. This is the first time I have dressed up in since the pandemic for sure, because I don't have kids. So, if you have a kid, you will be spending more on Halloween. You want to make the holidays special for them. Quebec is the province that spends the least with $52 per household on average. Like they say, like you guys say in the chat, Ontario, $77. They are the top spenders. One that I was very surprised by was like only $62 in BC, in British Columbia. So that is, I know, I found it a little bit surprising in terms of financial power and the price of things. But maybe because they're just really into healthy stuff that maybe they don't spend that much money on candy. One flaw of this survey, which is from Malaysia, is that it didn't take into account the territories. It only looked at the provinces, and that has like we are missing some data in terms of like how much people spend in Canada overall, but we have to take it up with legit. um, Furthermore, Canadian women are more likely to buy things for Halloween than men. I am personally not surprised. I think that one aspect of parenting that we've seen a lot and we've talked a lot in the past couple of years is the fact that there's a lot of labor that is usually done by women and things like making sure that your kid has a costume, making sure that um, there's candy in the house. Again, not like this is not absolute, not all women, not all men, but we do know that these tasks tend to fall more on women than they do in men. And in terms of like if whether people or Canadians are planning to buy things for Halloween or not, we have 58% that say yes and 42% that are not planning to spend any money on Halloween or to buy things for Halloween. Interestingly, I found this sort of like survey question in two different surveys, this one that I'm quoting here, but also from Statista. And the results were very, very similar. 42% was the no for both. But the yes went from 53 to 58%, depending on what you're looking at. It may be that they didn't ask here. There was an option for not sure in the Statista survey. This one didn't have one. Okay, now let's look at the states and look at who's spending the most. So this is how much people were planning on spending for Halloween. And we looked at Gen Z and millennials and then men and women. And we can see that millennials seems to be willing to probably spend a little more than Gen Z, except for the category of spending between $100 and $250. In a way, it could make sense because millennials were older and maybe like have a bit more money. And then in terms of men and women, one thing that I found really interesting is that women are more likely to spend like the middle amount. So they went from $1 to $250, maybe even $500. But then in the extremes, we see men are more likely to spend that. Some, for example, people who are willing to spend more than $1,000. I don't know who they are. I wish them the best, but that is a lot of money. Regarding how much we spend on costumes, Americans have said that about 86% of Americans will spend under $100 on a costume, uh, compared to 74, and this is all in USD, compared to 74% of Canadians. I do wonder if the part of this discrepancy is that things are just more expensive here in Canada. Even when we do the conversion, it's just not the conversion. We just have like things are a little bit pricier here in Canada. But I think it's safe to say that most people are not spending over $100 on their costumes. And then in October 2023, Canadians spend $1.8 billion on candy. So great times for the candy makers here in Canada. And then our last expenditure, I love this one. It is the expected U.S. expenditures for Jack-o'-lanterns. And this year it's expected to be $834 million. And it's up from last year, which was 808. So I guess we're really going into those pumpkins really hard. So yeah. So now Emily will talk about shopping habits.
We're going to look at shopping habits of Americans in recent years. Next slide. So, thank you. In 2023, roughly 6 in 10 consumers in the United States stated that they plan to shop for Halloween costumes on Amazon.com, making it by far the most popular choice. About half of surveyed US shoppers intended to visit a special Halloween and/or costume shop. So I am amongst those 48%. I bought my fake cigarette holder from the Halloween store on the corner of St. Catherine and McGill College. Now, in my costume, I something borrowed this beautiful faux Dalmatian top I borrowed from Marcella. My faux fur collar I got from Old Navy online, which puts me with 29% of Americans who bought their costume from an online big box store. Next slide, please. So, as a last minute shopper, these stats made me feel a little self-conscious. Back in 2023, more than 1 in 5 Americans said that they actually shop for Halloween stuff all year round. That made it the most popular time of year for picking up costumes, candy, and decorations. Coming in second place was September, when the Halloween hype really starts to build. And only about 10% of folks are like me and admitted to being last-minute shoppers scrambling to get ready for Halloween. Next slide, please. So in 2023, a little over a third of Americans thought that July was way, way too early for stores to start rolling out their Halloween merchandise. But interestingly, more than 20% of people were totally fine with Halloween items popping up whenever, no matter how early. For them, it's never too soon to get spooky. On a personal note, my husband falls into this category. He put out our first Halloween decorations outside in mid-September. Yeah. So Marcella, it's up to you with costume and makeup trends.
Okay. So yeah, so we're going to talk about costume and makeup trends and what we tend to choose, who is the most popular costume right now. So we're going to start with costumes, and it was really hard to try to find what are the most popular costumes because we would need to sort of like survey, either like look at children and see what they're wearing or survey what's been bought, but then like there's so many places. But Google has made it a little bit easier for us because they've come up with, it was Google Trends, and it came up with this amazing site. It is for the US, but a lot of the data, I've seen some articles, I think that they sent press releases to some of the Canadian newscasters, and the data was, while not exactly the same, very, very similar. So they created, you know how they usually do the zeitgeist at the end of the year, they have the frightgeist for Halloween. It's a really interesting site. I'm going to share it in the chat just in case you're interested, but it's also cited in our references. And they've looked at searches and what kind of costumes people have been searching for in the past couple of weeks, couple of months. What is really nice about this is that you have different options. When, for example, if you look at Halloween decor, it was really interesting to see that floating candles have been the top, which like I've looked at as well. So I can see why, because if you've never seen them, they look really pretty, especially like for the Harry Potter fan millennial crowd. I think that if that's what you're into, like the floating candles are a hit. But also you can see they divided by maps. So it has a sound. It has sound. I'm gonna take it out. But you know, like in different areas to see what is most popular. So it's really interesting to look at that and see in which area of the US what is really calling out to people. For us, we're gonna take a look at what the sort of like the main list it says, and we can see that out of the first 8, Six of them are K-pop demon hunters. I have to say that I help a 10-year-old find her Halloween costume every year, and this year it was rough because she first wanted to be Hamilton or the Schuyler sisters from Hamilton. She loves musicals. And then we were having some issues. It's hard to find in Canada a Hamilton costume for a 10-year-old. Or like a Schuyler sister that were not either from AliExpress or that were not $5 billion. So then I said, hey, I know how to do Rumi's hair from K-pop Demon Hunters. Why don't you do that? Anyway, I think that now it's easier, but when we looked at, which we looked at like at the, sometime mid-September, you could only get them from like AliExpress or things like that. And we just wanted to make sure there was something that was going to arrive on time. So I found a great light blue dress, and she is now Elizabeth Schuyler. But yes, we're seeing that first eight are from K-pop Demon Hunters. We also have a Labubu, makes sense, a lot of Wicked. I love that Shrek is still coming back. Like Shrek is still there. Like he's still home strong. We're seeing Hamilton as well with the Hamilton and 11 and Founding Father. One thing that I found really interesting is when we started planning this workshop, we're currently in Media Literacy Week. And there's a lot of activities that we've done this week, and there was one that we had maybe planned for this particular workshop where we were going to look at the list of most popular costumes and then maybe have a conversation about representation, right? What kind of like people were being represented by these costumes. Well, joke's on us in a great way, because if we look at the top 10, we have six people who are East Asian or East Asian, like was one of them, I think is actually a tiger, like Jerpy the tiger is actually a tiger, so it's not a person, but is Asian coded. And then we also have Alphaba, who is, well, she's not technically Black, her character is pretty much Black coded. And sort of like it reflects that experience. So we were very pleasantly surprised that these are the costumes that seems to be the most popular this year. If you like to dress up your pet, I don't have pets, so I don't know if I would do it, but Emily has a cat. She has Enzo. These are the most popular pet
Marcella, I
costumes.
also have 101 Dalmatians.
You're true. Um, the most popular costume for a pet is a pumpkin. I love because I use AI to create these pictures, and they all look like I think a real dog or a real cat would look if you put a costume on them. It's like, why are we doing this? So the top one is a pumpkin, and then we have a hot dog, a cat, a superhero, and a bumblebee. So these are, and it's really funny because I was on TikTok a couple of days ago, and I saw this woman taking my pictures of all these dogs dressed up, and like you could see like there were bees there were superheroes, there was a pumpkin. So I guess I trust this data is from 2021. Maybe it has changed. Maybe there are other costumes, but I feel like these are pretty much classics, and also they're easy to put on a dog. I would not want to try. Emily, I don't know if
Well,
you.
I would say putting it on a dog is one thing. I would never try to put one on a cat. But did want to say that Marcella did create the superhero cat in my cat Enzo's likeness.
In terms of makeup in Canada, we see sort of like people go for different types. We see that about 47% they go either for scary or funny makeup. And about 35% go for artistic or sexy makeup. Um, I have a nephew who is very adamant that he will not paint his face, even though he's a minion. He is very adamant that he will not do it. In terms of where we get our inspiration, now I will say that this is from 2022, and I think that it may have changed a little bit since then. But most people have said that they get their inspiration from YouTube, which makes sense because it is usually videos, so you can get it's more like that tutorial. Hey, this is how I do this. Pinterest, again, it makes sense because it is a place where people go for inspiration about decoration and about fashion. Then we have Facebook, 20% TikTok, and 19% Instagram. What I believe, and it'd be interesting to see the data for like 2025, is that probably TikTok and Instagram have gone up, particularly TikTok. I know that in the past month, I've seen a lot of creators that created content like 15 days of easy Halloween costumes and things like that. So I do think that we'll see, and I've seen so many different women dressed as Esmeralda from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. So I do feel like we're going to see that more and more. And again, TikTok, because it's video, you have that tutorial aspect that in the other ones might just be more static and you don't get that. Okay, so now Emily will talk to us about candy and what we want and what we are buying.
I will say I did look at YouTube for a tutorial on how to do Cruella's eyes. So let's dive into candy trends that have been emerging over the last year. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for 2024's Halloween, about 4 in 5 consumers in the United States said that they were likely to buy chocolate bars, chocolate candy bars, making it the most popular candy item for trick-or-treat season. Licorice was the least likely item to be purchased for Halloween. I was personally surprised. I quite like licorice. And I was also surprised that candy corn didn't come in last place, but it turns out candy corn is a very divisive candy. According to a 2017 survey, 49% of Americans find candy corn tasty, while I'm in the group of 23% who report it as, quote, gross. And perhaps another reason, though, why it isn't in last place here is that 21% of folks who don't like candy corn still think it's an important part of Halloween. Next slide, please. So last year, around 54% of people in the US were planning on buying Skittles for Halloween, which is a wise choice because when children were surveyed about what their top non-chocolate candy was for Halloween, Skittles ranked a close second just after Sour Patch Kids. Now, if US consumers were smart and listened to kids, they would buy far less Jolly Ranchers, which only 8% of kids said they liked or was their favorite, and buy more Twizzlers. Next slide, please. Okay, so the most disappointing items to receive. So, this statistic shows the results of a survey which asked US consumers which items, other than candy, they were most disappointed to get for Halloween. Now, I would like to make a case for the humble raisin. Back in the 1900s, when I was a child, pictured here, I loved raisins, and I still do. And who knew that 11% of people hate getting raisins for Halloween? I loved them. Also, I would have welcomed a cool pencil, but apparently 6% of people, or rather 11% of people, are against this idea. And 3-year-old Emily would have loved to get stickers for Halloween, but apparently 6% of people disagree. Next slide, please. So, a 2017 survey asked folks across different generations which Halloween candy they really didn't want to find in their trick or treat bag. And the results are kind of hilarious. Baby boomers were not here for jawbreakers, with nearly 15% saying no thank you to those very rock hard sweet treats. Meanwhile, Gen Xers and millennials were united like me in their dislike of candy corn. It's obviously not everyone's cup of tea. And now Marcella is going to talk to us on the very serious topic of witch hunts.
Yeah, so we'll do a little tonal shift right now, but we're going to talk about witch hunts because, Halloween, it's all fun and games, but witchcraft and sort of like Halloween themes in a way have been used for years to persecute people. So we thought we would talk about this. We also want to show you a really interesting project that has come up with witch hunts. So let's talk a little bit about witch hunts and what they brought to us. So we see witch hunts were very popular in Europe. We saw them a lot between, say, like Middle Ages, all the way almost to like the mid, actually bang on mid of the 19th century. They took place in different ways and in different places. This is a study that was done of, executions of people who were tried and executed in witch trials in Europe between 1300s and 1850, so about 550 years. The interesting about this is that the group of researchers look at the data and then reconcile it to what would be like modern borders, so we can have an idea of what was done in each country. Germany was at the top with 9,587 people who were tried, and then about almost 7,000 that were executed. Um, some countries you see that they had a higher execution rate than others. Germany doesn't have the most. One thing I will say is that we're going to look at the example of Scotland right now, but also I want to say that, for example, in Spain, we said the number is not that high and then only one person was executed, but it doesn't mean that they didn't have other ways in which they were persecuting and executing people. For example, in Spain, we know that during this time, we also had the Inquisition, and while people were not being tried and executed because they were witches, we know a lot of Jewish people and Muslim people who were executed because they were not Christians. So all this to say, but as we can see, it was an issue in Europe. And we're going to look at Scotland right now because couple of researchers from the University of Edinburgh created this amazing research, which is amazing project, which is the Survey of Scottish Witchcraft. And it is an electronic resource for the history of witchcraft and witch hunting in Scotland. So as we saw before, about 3,000 individuals, 3,300 more or less, were accused of being witches in Scotland. And of those, about 305 had trials, of which 67% of those were actually executed, like were, declared guilty and they were executed. However, many of them escaped before, or many of the people who were accused escaped, died of other causes, were excommunicated or punished in other ways before they could be tried, and they could be sentenced. We know that a lot of people fled before prosecution. So, why would you want to stay in a place that wants to kill you or was accusing you to be a witch? However, there is an issue with this data. Well, not an issue, but something to consider is that a lot of the cases that are in this particular database are cases from central courts where were known to be more lenient than local courts. So if you were tried in a central court, you had better luck than maybe, interestingly, than if you were tried by your peers in your own town. Surprising nobody, 84% of the people who were accused were women, and most of them were between 30 and 60 years old. So this research contains all the people to have been known to have been accused of witchcraft in early modern Scotland. It contains detailed trial information, and we're going to go and take a look right now about this resource. So this resource you can be sort of like interacted with in two different ways. The first one is the survey, where you can look for a particular name. So, for example, let's say I assumed that there would be a few Sarahs there, and there you go. And then, but you can also, if you go to the search part, you can also search by person and some of their characteristics. So, like their marital status, their socioeconomic status, their place of residence, when was the case. We can search by case. And this one I love because you have like what ritual objects they were accused of using, what kind of magic or like which, and midwifery is there. So I was like, ooh, okay. What non-natural beings were they saying that they were, consorting with? What kind of demonic pacts? And I love which is kisses devil's bottom. I love it. So you can just choose something and search for it. You can also do it by the trial, for what the verdict was. So if you wanted to see like everyone who was guilty or what kind of sentence they got, and also people involved. So I have pulled up two cases just so to give you an idea, because I was really curious about like the midwifery ones, because it's like, why would like was being a midwife something dangerous but also bad? Now, from the cases I've read, I think we have a combination of personal grudges and people with mental illness. So that was something that we saw. So, for example, we have here what I love about this one. So we have some of the characterization of their witchcraft. So demonic, folk healing. So again, folk healing. So people who maybe were doing, were helping other people with their ailments. Again, this was like, what's the date of this one? If we can see the date, 1661. Like medicine was not that advanced back then. So Maybe they were just helping other people with their pain, implicated by another. So somebody said that this like was accused, and then they kind of like told on this person. Neighborhood dispute, very interesting. And then we have some notes I love here, and then the people who were involved. And there was someone whose job was to be a witch pricker. And it was like, I wonder what is that, right? So witch pricker was a job someone had that they would prick a witch, like a supposed witch, with a needle to see if they had like if they were witches. Like apparently, like that would tell you if they were witches. Um, I would love to know how you apply to be a witch pricker, what kind of qualifications you needed to be a witch pricker. And then if you go to more information, they talk about some of the, again, like the non-natural beings that they consorted with, the demonic pacts, what kind of witches meetings they went to. And then a lot of them times it starts with like after like a quarrel, or like she said that, if we use this thread, her cloth would sell, and then it did, and the other cell didn't, the other cloth didn't sell, but like maybe it was just like good cloth. And then here we have another case, again, midwifery, and this one I loved. I like this is more these are notes by the researchers, but it says she was seen walking on Samuel Stone's land and therefore being part of Lady Samuel Stone plot to kill her husband, which is like that is a leap. But it was the 1600s. So this is one way you can interact with it. The other way you can interact with it is this map. And again, both of them are linked in the slides, and we will be sharing the slides with you, where you can see the distribution as well of the different people. So I'm just going to come back, like start it again, because I was playing with it earlier today. So we can choose by gender. So let's look at like the male ones, just like, there are a few of them. And then you can choose their occupations, or you can classify them, or their social classification, and then their jobs if you want. And then you can, if you click on them, you'll see more and more and more of them. And then you can get more information. So you have information about the people. If you click on it, it will give you more information. So it's a really cool, and it's a research and data gathering and data dissemination tool. One thing that I find really interesting is it's from 2011, I think. So quite advanced for its time. So if you're interested, take a look. And then I also want to talk about the Salem witch trials, because I lived in Salem for 2.5 years, and I feel like the Salem witch trials is a really interesting fake news story. So the first piece of fake news that you may not know is that the Salem witch trials didn't happen in Salem, Massachusetts. They actually happened in Salem Village, which was a town that was close to Salem, where now there's a town called Danvers. So it wasn't in Salem proper. Salem has a really interesting history that has nothing to do with witches. It was a port that had where there was a lot of commerce, and it's really, really interesting, particularly with China and India. So if you're ever interested, Salem is a beautiful city to visit. But yeah, so if you have never heard, or if you've heard of the Salem witch trials, but you don't really know what happened, the Salem witch trials, the whole thing took place between February of 1692 and May of 1693. So a little bit over a year. It wasn't that long. And it all starts because there's these two girls, twins, not twins as in like sisters, but twins like TWEEENs, like, like 11, 12. And they start acting funny. And some people describe it as juvenile antics. But they say they're having fits and doing all these things. And eventually these two girls say that they've been cursed by, and they accuse 3 women of being witches. The first one was an enslaved woman, indigenous woman that worked in their house called Tituba. And then the other 2 were Sarah Osborne and Sarah Good, who were women who were in a way marginalized in their own community. This sort of like spreads like wildfire. This woman get accused. Tituba eventually confesses because she thinks it's going to get her out of trouble. Spoiler alert, It doesn't. And then another family has girls who also start accusing people. Surprisingly, most of the people that were being accused of being witches were enemies of this family, and their in-laws as well. So it starts spreading. There's over 100, 200 people who are accused. Of those 200 people, 54 confess. However, some of those confessions were either coerced. Others were just done on people who couldn't really confess to anything. One of them, for example, was on a 4-year-old. Um, a lot of people who had mental illness, who were, who had learning like disabilities. We see all of that. Originally, we see that most of the people who are being accused are, again, people who are marginalized, people who are either poor or with mental illness, or that were living lives that maybe were not in agreement with what people thought the way they should be living their lives. They were mostly women. There were people, as I said, like we have a 4-year-old, we have a woman who is in prison with her 4-year-old and her newborn dies in jail. And a lot of people also confess because they thought it was going to get them out of trouble. For the most part, it did, but for some it didn't. They ended up trying and executing 19 people. Most of them were hanged, except for one who was crushed. And even though there were only 19 people who were executed, we do know that there were people who died in jail. There were people who had very lasting effects from being imprisoned of this, like living in those prisons was not great. The conditions were pretty terrible. So we know that a lot of people, and it all started because, once someone said something, how it all stops is because at one point, someone accuses the governor's wife, the governor, like the wife of the governor of Massachusetts, of being a witch. And that's when the governor says, ugh, maybe we should stop this. So they have a new judgment and they say that they can no longer try people on spectral evidence. So spectral evidence is what was used to judge people, to try people. And it was things that people said appeared to them in dreams, or people who were saying, I see the spirit of this person there, and it's like, it wants to harm me. So they said, we cannot do that. We also know that a lot of people who were tried, it was not only their crime that what was being tried, but they were also using their personal histories, hearsay, their reputation in the community, and all that. So pretty much a fake news story. And we thought also it was important to mention it because it is Middle of the Week. Now, the people of Salem, oh, we have a hand up. We'll come back to it in a little bit. The people of, oh, if you want to write it in the chat, that'd be great. The people of Salem acknowledge this, and there is a lot, but they've also have found a way to make lemonade out of these lemons. So as I said, I lived in Salem for 2.5 years, and Salem is witch city. So they have, so they have actually taken the witches as their identity. So if you go to Salem, Massachusetts, which again, beautiful town, you will see that the police shield has a witch. Their elementary school is called Witchcraft Heights, which to me, it sounds like something out of a Disney Channel show. But they've really taken it into sort of like to their hearts. Now, part of it is because throughout the past 2 centuries, there's been like a way, like sort of like a different, there have been waves of interest in Salem, and sort of like mixing it with the occult and the trials, just because people were interested. A lot of it like because it was on guidebooks. And then 1960s, they're like, hey, let's make a business out of this. So between mid-September and October 2023, Salem saw 1.3 million visitors. Usually they get them on the weekends. It is bananas to go there on a weekend. There is no parking. There is nowhere to move around. If you see like the third picture, that is a little bit of what it looks like during October. Back in 2022, which was like, we're still coming out of the pandemic. Salem saw 101 visitors in a particular Saturday. And keep in mind that Salem has 47,000 people who live there. So almost twice, they had almost twice, actually more than twice the amount of visitors in one day. It is great for the businesses. It is not great for the people that live there because it makes life just really complicated. But it is very profitable. So it is estimated that $140 million are spent in Salem during the Halloween season. So I guess that kind of works.
All right, so next I'm going to talk about entertainment and media. We're going to stay on this slide just for a moment, Marcella. So horror isn't just horror and horror movies. They aren't just surviving in today's movie scene, they're thriving. So in 2023, scary movies made up over 10% of the box office revenue, which is double than what it was a decade ago. In fact, some horror movies are even outshining some of the big Hollywood franchises. So, case in point, after its release, the indie shocker called Terrifier 3 totally blew past expectations and even knocked Joker 2 off of the throne. If you could just go to the previous slide, Marcella.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was.
That's okay. Well, I'm almost there. It kind of doesn't matter. I'm just being Cruella. So yeah, this indie movie came out. It was called Terrifier 3, and it Joker 2 had come out with Lady Gaga and Joaquin Phoenix, and it knocked it off the first place in the box office. So what is the secret behind horror movies, and why is horror killing it right now? So now we can go to the next slide, Marcella. So we can actually get a pretty solid idea of how much money big horror movies are making, and it's not just from ticket sales. Everything from streaming to TV deals. So after you subtract costs like marketing and distribution, we're left with a pretty good estimate of what the producers actually made. And if you're guessing who's sitting at the top of horror money mountain, it is the movie Saw. So Saw was a low budget thriller. It was made for only 1.2 million and it pulled in over 130 million dollars in profit. So you must be thinking to yourselves, if horror movies are that profitable, why doesn't everyone just make horror films all the time? And the answer is it's a bit of a mixed bag. So first off, horror is getting made more often, probably thanks to all the juicy profit stats I just shared, but it's not smooth sailing. So for every horror hit, there's a flop that's lurking in the shadows. And so as a result, the horror genre can be very risky. One clue is how long movies stick around in theaters. So documentary films, for example, normally last in theaters, like on the big screen, for around 5 weeks on average. Horror movies are typically gone in half that time. So that means that horror movies really have to make a big splash and they have to make it fast. Usually they bank on their opening weekend. So they rely very heavily on marketing, on buzz, and just sheer luck. And it's very high risk, high reward. So quality doesn't matter all that much with horror movies. I found that with horror movies, it turns out that it's when it comes to making money, critical reviews don't matter much. So since these films really rely heavily on clever marketing and having a really big killer opening weekend, it's maybe not so surprising that, the audience reviews or critic reviews don't always line up with box office success. So, in fact, when you're looking at the ratings on, say, IMDb, the International Movie Database, or their users or critics on the website Metacritic, most of the profitable horror films, like, review wise, are all over the place. So, some are critical hits, but more than half of those films that were very profitable actually scored below average when you compare them to other genres of films. So while dramas, for example, need to get glowing reviews in order to make money, horror can still make lots of money, even if the reviews are just so-so. Um, but there is no middle ground when it comes to the release sizes. So your release is either going to be very wide or very small. So if you're a horror movie and you get picked up for a US theatrical release, chances are it's going to go one of two ways. Either you hit a ton of theaters, we're talking over 2,000, or you get a super limited run on fewer than 50 screens. And so then the question is, well, why such extremes? It mostly comes down to how horror movies tend to perform. So they don't usually stick along for long in theaters. And so there are two main strategies that seem to work. Strategy number one is doing a big studio blitz. So you launch the movie in as many theaters as possible, you make a huge splash on opening weekend, and you hope that the buzz kind of carries it. The other one is we call it the slow indie burn. So this is when you take the film on a bit of a road trip, you show it in smaller venues across the country, and it's more grassroots, but you build the loyal following. Next slide. So, as of October of 2022, when folks in the US were asked about their favorite horror movie franchises, Halloween and Friday the 13th stole the show. They were getting love from about 56% of people. Right behind them was A Nightmare on Elm Street and The Exorcist and Scream. Now, when it comes to individual horror films, Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds from 1963 was a huge favorite, with a whopping 81% of adults saying they either liked it or loved it as their favorite horror film. The Silence of the Lambs wasn't far behind, with about 80% of folks saying they liked that. And Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho also made the top 10, with 70% of people saying they were fans. And fun fact, the woman on the left of your screen is Jamie Lee Curtis. She starred in the original Halloween movie and returned for many of the franchise films. And just to the right of her is her mother, Janet Leigh, who starred in The Birds. As of October 2022, about 55% of US adults said they were into psychological horror films, so the kind that mess with your mind. Interestingly, the same number of people also said that they enjoyed horror comedies like my personal favorite, Shaun of the Dead, which is pictured here. On the flip side, not everyone's a fan of blood and guts. So around 54% of folks said they weren't into gory horror, and 53% weren't too keen on slasher films. So the kind where someone's always lurking in the shadows with a knife. When it comes to generational divides, there is a big one. So nearly two-thirds of Gen Z adults have seen a horror film in theaters within the past year. But for everyone else, not so much. Less than 45% of older generations have done the same. And a whopping 88% of baby boomers have not seen a horror film in theaters in over 3 years. Next slide. So horror fans really showed up to the cinemas in 2024. Leading the pack was the movie A Quiet Place Day 1, which crushed it at the box office. It raked in over 135 million. Coming in hot at number 2 was Alien Romulus, which made around 105.3 million, which is not bad considering their theatrical release was just 2.5 months. Next slide. And then when it comes to box office scares, 2017's movie It, based on the Stephen King novel, is still the reigning champion. It brought back in 328.8 million in the US and Canada, making it the highest grossing horror movie ever in the domestic market. But right behind it is the 1975 classic Jaws, still holding strong after all these years. And a recent addition to this list is this year's movie Sinners. It's directed by Ryan Coogler and it stars Michael B. Jordan. It came out in April of this year, and it's been climbing the charts very fast. In just a short time, it surged to third place, pulling in over 275 million domestically, and it edged out Jaws to become the second highest grossing horror film in the US and the top grossing original horror movie of all time.
Okay, so thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you enjoyed it. We hope that you had a little fun with us. We definitely had a lot of fun prepping for this. Emily and I share an office when we are in the office. And as we were working, we kept being like, hey, get this. So we were really sharing. I know if there are any questions, but if not, if there are, please feel free to put them in the chat. If you want to know more about us, you can follow the Digital Scholarship Hub, which is the vibes, the go-go vibes, which is the sort of like the center that I coordinate, and we have a YouTube channel where we record a lot of our sessions. This one will be recorded, that has been recorded, will be there as well. We will be sharing with you hopefully by the end of today, depending on how long it takes me to, if we need to do any edits, but we'll share the slides and the recording. You can also follow us on Twitter, or X, I still call it Twitter. If you want to sort of like have an idea and keep an eye on other content that we might put out and other workshops that we might offer. And we'll also be sharing the bibliography with you. You can find it with this link, but again, we're going to share the slides, so you'll be able to just click it. It's a lot of stats.
Yeah, a lot of stats.
Perfect. So thank you so much. I hope you have like if you are planning on going trick-or-treating or celebrating Halloween, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful Halloween. I don't know how it is where you are
Stay
here in Montreal.
dry,
In
stay
Montreal, it
dry.
is raining a lot. So I feel like it's
Yeah,
going to be a very interesting Halloween day.
yeah.
But thank you again so much for coming. We loved having you here. Okay, so it's raining in
Oh,
Ottawa
it's
as
raining in
well.
Ottawa too. Oh, yeah,
Yes.
sad.
It's funny because last year for Halloween, I was helping my niece. She was an 80s girl and she had like this like bright green tights. It's like, it's going to be too hot for that because it was really hot last year for
So hot
Halloween.
last year.
So
Yeah.
it's like, you want to be too hot with this? And now I'm like, oh my God, that Elizabeth Schuyler dress will just get so wet.
Yeah. It's a long dress. It's gonna get
Yes.
the bottom's gonna get
And it has a
soggy.
petticoat. It's a whole thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you so, so much for coming.
Thank you.
We tend to do this, we call this pop culture by the numbers. So if you are interested, let us know. Also, because you're going to have the link to the recording on YouTube. If you want to see the one we did on Taylor Swift or the one we did on online dating, you can find them there. Have a great rest of your day. And yeah, we hope that we will see you very soon. Bye.
Bye bye.